Esther. The book of Esther takes place during the reign of a Persian king identified as Ahasuerus. King Ahasuerus is commonly referred to by his Greek name Xerxes I. Xerxes I is particularly known for invading Greece in 480 BC only to be defeated. The book of Esther begins with King Ahasuerus angrily deposing Queen Vashti. Vashti had greatly upset him by refusing to display her beauty at a banquet the king was hosting. The king's counselors urged him to punish Vashti by taking the queenship away from her and giving this position to someone more worthy, lest, in imitation to Vashti's disobedience, women throughout the Persian Empire will look with contempt upon their husbands. Esther 1:17. The king does and initiates the process of finding a new queen. Eventually, a young Jewish woman is chosen who, among the Gentiles, is known as Esther, and whose Hebrew name is Hadassah, meaning myrtle, a small flowering tree. Esther 1:7. Due to the early death of her parents, Esther was raised by her uncle Mordecai, a court official. Like Esther, Mordecai had a non-Hebrew name. Unlike Esther, though, Mordecai's Hebrew name is not given. Their non-Hebrew names likely originate from two important Babylonian gods, Ishtar and Marduk. When Esther is chosen to be queen, both she and her uncle work directly for the king in his court. In commenting on these two court Jews, Irving Greenberg writes that, I quote, "Court Jews were typically half Gentile in their ways of living. When Mordecai asked Esther to plead with the king, she vacillated at first, just the reaction one would expect from a marginal Jew who is reluctant to lose her place in society." Nonetheless, Greenberg adds, the evidence points to Mordecai's and Esther's being devoted Jews. Usually it takes that type to risk their lives to save their people. The rabbinic tradition very strongly insists that they were observant Jews. The text tends to support this tradition, in particular, notes Greensburg, by Esther's request for a people to turn to God with intercessory fasting. Esther asked the Jewish people to fast after the high-ranking court official Haman, in envy of Mordecai, had persuaded the king to sign a letter by which Jewish people throughout the Persian realm would be mercilessly killed. Desiring to save her people, Esther prays and fasts for 3 days, and then she dares to approach the king, even though she had not been called by him. Seeing Esther, the king reacts in fierce anger, Esther 15:7, to which the queen responds by fainting. Quickly changing his disposition, the king rushes from his throne to comfort Esther, and Esther invites him to a special dinner. He agrees, and at the dinner Esther denounces Haman for plotting to destroy her people. When the king leaves the dinner, Haman begs Esther to spare his life while holding on to the couch that Esther was reclining on. In return, the king sees Haman and accuses Haman of attempting to assault the queen in my presence in my own house. Esther 7:8. Shortly afterwards, by order of the king, Haman is hanged, and the king issues another letter permitting the Jewish people to live under their own laws and to defend themselves against those who attack them. Esther 16. Providence. To decide when the Jewish people would die, Haman played a game of dice called Pur. Esther 3:7, which means lots. Chance determined that Jewish people would die in the month of Adar. The joyful Jewish festival of Purim, meaning lots, celebrates God acting through Esther and Mordecai to save his people. Esther 9:17. The celebration of Purim is a joyful affirmation that beyond all disorder, chaos, and chance is a God of love who upholds all in existence and who subtly draws good out of even the most awful of circumstances. The ultimate expression of this typically hidden divine action is the crucifixion of Jesus, which at first sight seemed to indicate to Jesus' followers that what is most essential to the world is chaos, violence, and chance. However, Upon rising on the third day, Jesus revealed God's truthful abiding love is the most essential reality, as the reality that simply is and is greater than all evil violence that has and will take place. The punishment that Haman receives, impaled on the pole that he had set up to kill Mordecai on, is a visible sign of what Galatians teaches. Do not be deceived. God is not mocked. For whatever a man sows, that he also will reap. Galatians 6:7. This literally applies to Haman in his lifetime and may apply, if there is no repentance, to others eternally after they have died. Typology. Esther prefigures Mary. In writing on Esther as a type of Mary, Pope John Paul II comment Bergsman Petrie, contrasts Judith with Esther. I quote, Judith and Esther both risked their lives to win the salvation of their people. The two interventions, which anticipate Mary's mission, however, are quite different. Esther does not kill the enemy, but by playing the role of mediator, intercedes for those who are threatened with destruction. By killing her people's enemy, Judith anticipated Mary's collaborative role with her offspring in crushing the head of Satan. Genesis 3:15. Mary's offspring is Jesus, who is present through the church, Christ's presence extended through time. As members of the church, we're invited to participate in Jesus' defeat of evil. Esther foreshadows the defeat of evil in a different way than Judith. Unlike Judith, Esther does not directly fight against her people's enemy. Instead, she goes to the king and begs him to spare her people. Similarly, but in a perfect sense, Mary intercedes for her people, which is the entire human race, by offering her son as a perfect sacrifice to God. Only because of Christ's perfect sacrifice offered by Mary can our imperfect efforts and sacrifices be made pleasing to God, since they may now be taken up, incorporated in, and transformed by the one perfect sacrifice of Jesus, the one high priest and perfect victim. Another difference between Esther's intercession and Mary's intercession that Bergsman Petrie point out is that unlike Esther who interceded only for her people, Mary intercedes for all people.